So tonight we have Dan Watson with us. He's presented with us before, and due to popular demand, we wanted to bring him back. So I want you to give a big round of applause to Dan and pay attention to what he's got to tell you. You're going to learn a lot.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, everybody. Can you hear me well? Good, good. Dave brings out a really good point about the CITPG. I have participated with this group for probably 8-9 years. When we lived in Columbia, South Carolina, I rode all the way up here to attend some of these meetings because we were so small in Columbia, we didn't have this. So it was certainly a good place to get started, trying to meet people that were looking into the same types of technology struggles that I was seeing. And then later we had an opportunity to come back once we moved up here and present about 5 years ago on a predecessor product called IAG. And was anybody here 5 years ago attending? A few of us. Coming back again, getting the call to come and present was great. Not only it gave me an opportunity to call my boss and say, hey, I'm not flying this week. I want to stay home so I can attend this, but it certainly gives us another opportunity to come and talk to all of you. Tonight, the topic that I picked out is on hardening direct access deployments. Specifically built from a real-world deployment scenario. How many of you are beset with having to roll out the latest technology that somebody at your company or perhaps you picked out? Many of you, right? So the thing about it is you get this stuff from Microsoft, a wonderful company, my former employer, great people over there, and it reads wonderfully as you read down the tech sheet. TechNet says do this, do this, do this, do this, and at the end the smoke clears and you have an operational solution. It's not that way, is it? Not all the time. So in what we're going to talk about today, you'll see that I got set up with a challenge, and this is some of the ways that I approached it. I don't have a demo. Boo, right? Don't have a demo. I did one 5 years ago. I'm not doing one on this one. See me 5 years from now. I'll do another demo then. So let's move on to what we're really talking about here. So tonight, really, we're going to talk about what's direct access. Who here has deployed direct access before? Anybody? Somebody? Me? My daughter in the back, she's probably had to put it out at least one time because I would say, go in there and reboot that server. I need somebody to send this command. So I'll talk about what direct access is, and we'll try and demystify some of the connectivity that goes along with it. We'll look at some of the benefits around direct access. There's a skills matrix, and this is probably one of the biggest deployment blockers for most professionals, is all of these things I have to know. We'll talk about the connectivity, because there's certainly a lot of, conjecture that go along with this, as far as how does it connect, what are the requirements, and then talk about what are really the deployment challenges, right? It's not as simple as just following the steps. There's some things you're going to run into. Some of those are technology, and as a consultant, I find out that some of those are actually human skills. Direct access hardening is what I'm really here to talk to you about. If you leave tonight and you have a better understanding for a way that you can approach an otherwise third-party product and harden that product in its presentation to your DMZ, your internet, or your internal user base, I've met my goals, because I want to leave you with thoughts about how you can apply additional security in your walk of life. I'll do a little Q&A at the end, and then we'll follow up from there. So as I said, what's direct access? Well, really simply, secured, always on, remote connectivity solution that's super flexible, super robust, right? That sounds like the best marketing spiel that anybody could have put together. If you're a VPN user, you've been using this for quite some time. You dial in, you enter a password, you're connected. You may have some access to local area resources. Those may be simply mail, a file server, other types of information systems, but then you're done and you close that VPN and you're stranded in the hotel room. You can get out to the internet, and that's about what you can get. The one thing that the VPN doesn't typically provide you is that ability to reach out to your endpoint and do some work on that endpoint. Direct access gives you that capability. It provides you seamless access to your internal resources because you don't ever have to put a password in. It serves as a platform for you to manage out. One of the biggest things that I find talking to customers and looking at their requirements is the security group. Who here works in a security function? Typically says, hey, can't I use this to go identify some of those lost laptops that we hunt down all the time? Well, certainly, if you have the telemetry in the machine and it's on, absolutely. It's a way that you can go war trolling and find one of these systems. And as I had said, it's fairly flexible, fairly resilient, and robust. And I put a little star on there simply because, well, let's face it, these things are made by humans, they have human frailties, and they're only as good as the solution that you deploy. Many people choose to put out a single server solution. They end up with a single server approach. If you don't have multiple servers, guess what? Server goes down, nobody can get in. That's not very robust. So we look at the direct access skills matrix. You know, it's a lot of different things, and yeah, I use some really cool stuff here, I guess. IPv4 and the honeycomb and the Active Directory, group policy, IPsec. And then down here, I'm trying to stay away from being a Dell guy tonight, but case integration. Case is a Dell-based product for reaching out and doing that endpoint management. When we look at IPv4, we're all pretty much very comfortable and familiar with IPv4 connectivity. IPv6, however, is somewhat of a new person on the block. Although it's more than 10 years old at this point, adoption has not been very strong. We see now conversations from companies about putting out the Internet of Things. They're really talking about leveraging IPv6. Direct access leverages IPv6 in its external communication, and of course, I'll talk about this a little later, but if you have manage out, you will end up using IPv6 in a manage out capability. When you look at Active Directory, you could spend hours talking about Active Directory. In fact, when Kevin called me first, I said, yeah, I've got a presentation on, early signs of compromise in Active Directory. And after I thought about it, I thought, I've been dying to play this deck somewhere. And so you guys are first people to see this. So congratulations. But Active Directory, you could go on for days, weeks, hours. Who are the Active Directory specialists in the room tonight? I got one here. All right, everybody, the guy with the blue shirt on, he's the guy for Active Directory. But seriously, so that's another component of it. Group policy in and of itself is another piece of the skills matrix involved with deploying Active Directory. You certainly can have plenty of fun times with group policy. I've seen, integration issues, policy conflicts, you name it. And that's not inside direct access. Wait until you suddenly start playing direct access as well. So there are a lot of pieces there that also play in. I think probably the ugliest monster in the room for direct access is really the IPsec piece. IPsec is essentially how we secure that communication from the client back to the server. I've got a nice diagram for you here, so it's not like we have total slideware tonight. But when you start talking about that, it's a little known technology. In 2012 R2, there are ways that you can get logging, but essentially if you don't truly understand the way that that connection is made, you will be sitting with those logs a long time. They're not very illustrative. In fact, I spent 3 days with the direct access team, and they could only point to a single line and say, we think it's this. Try these things. Sure. And the last one, like I said, I'm not here to plug Dell. That's who I work for. Great people. I love them. My boss isn't in the room, is he? Seems to pop up often. But case integration. One of the big pieces of case integration with direct access deployments is this is the SCCM replacement. So it allows us the opportunity to put in a another way to manage your endpoint. Unfortunately, the case does not have an IPv6 stack. It has an IPv4 stack. But fortunately, currently, the way it's architected is the client does the pull instead of the server doing the push to the client. So it makes a difference in the way that that piece gets integrated. You end up running port proxy to integrate that piece, but it is what it is. And the last piece that really is in here, the specific direct access knowledge, is the hardening. Customers over the last 6 months have really been hitting us with, how do you get always on connectivity? How do you make it so we can get to these endpoints? And moreover, they're asking for hardened solutions. They will point directly at the direct access solution and then say, that's too generic, it's too vanilla, it has frailties in the IKE section, we worry about exposure of domain controllers. What can you do for us that defends these segments of that solution? So let's talk about what is direct access and the connectivity that goes along with it. You can see over here what would be on my left. Excuse me. So you see over here, this is the local area network. We have any number of file servers, tool servers, certificate servers, resources that users want access to. Typically, you'll see in an enterprise deployment, the customer is going to have a data center of some type. They'll have potentially a read-write domain controller. I have seen read-only domain controller deployments, and I'll talk about the specific challenges that go along with those. And then, of course, they'll deploy what is the network location awareness server in that data center. So how does this happen? Has anybody got any direct experience with direct access? User tried to deploy it? One in the back, it looks like. So it's, again, I think it's pretty sexy. It's really sexy stuff from the standpoint of the way you do the connection. When your client moves outside, your little laptop over here, tablet in the case of one of my recent customers, he's looking to see if he can contact this NLA server, Network Location Awareness Server. So it's known by nla.sumdom.com. That's in his group policy. Again, when you deploy direct access, you're pushing group policies out to it. One of those elements in the group policy, tell that client who the NLA server is. So he's going to look for that. Can I find the NLA server? If I can't find the NLA server, I have to assume that I'm outside, because we don't ever want to publish the NLA server to the internet. Otherwise, we'd have a whole bunch of clients that would not be able to connect. So they wouldn't be able to bring their tunnel up. If he is able to find it, for example, when he comes in on the local area network, he assumes I'm inside. So I don't have to bring these tunnels up. I have access to all the local area network resources that I'm going to get to. Once he's determined that he's outside, your client then has to figure out how can I connect and what are my connectivity methods. So you've heard probably Teredo, 6-to-4, and IP HTTPS. These are your three client connectivity mechanisms. They're pseudo adapters. Do an ipconfig /all. You'll see this whole big list, and anything from Vista forward drop out, and there'll be these pseudo adapters. Teredo adapter, IP HTTPS adapter. They'll all be offline if you don't have direct access or some other variant of IPv6 available to that client. If that client holds basically a symmetric NAT IP address, you're sitting at a coffee house, you get a 192.168.x.live, he says, oh yeah, I must be a Teredo client. I can fire up my Teredo adapter, and I can use the prefix settings which I got in my group policies previously, identified by my direct access server's IPv4 address, and go look for da.sumdom.com. And that's how he knows this is a Teredo Connect. If he comes up, though, and he has an IPv4 public address, let's say you're at your house and you have a publicly assigned static IP, your client's going to come up. He's going to say, hey, look, I can't see the NLA server, but I have a public IPv4. I'm going to pick a 6-to-4 address. These are types of IPv6 connectivity. You'll see 2002, 2001, etc. The last scenario occurs for connectivity mechanisms for your client with IP HTTPS. IP HTTPS is, well, in the past we had said it was a high cost, if you will, for performance. That's no longer true, and we'll talk about why that's no longer true here in a second, but it's the default. So for example, let's say I go to highsecurity.com, and my security guy here has made sure that he's closed every port. The ports I would have used for Teredo, 6-to-4, any of that outbound connectivity that I need to be able to make that connection. Most probably, he still allows 80 and 443 to go out. IP HTTPS leverages the 80 and 443 connectivity, and we are then able to make our direct access IPsec connection back to direct access servers. So 3 methods of connectivity: Teredo, 6-to-4, IP HTTPS. They're dependent upon having a private NATed IP address, a public IP address, V4s, or not being able to bring those two up and falling to the default, which would be the IP HTTPS. As I had said earlier, IP HTTPS represents somewhat of a performance hit. Why is that? Well, when we have IPsec that we encrypt inside of an encrypted connection, we have double encryption. So that makes it doubly hard for us to decrypt and encrypt the communication. You can see the little note I have on here, ESP plus null encryption. And that's the indicator that you'll see when you have IP HTTPS. You'll have encapsulated security protocol plus null encryption so that we don't double encrypt that communication between the client and the server. And so we lower that requirement. You will see a performance hit over Teredo and 6-to-4, but it won't be as bad as it was in the old days. When that client attempts to bring up the connection, he brings up this first tunnel right here, the infrastructure tunnel. That tunnel allows him to, the client itself, the laptop, to authenticate. And then, once we're authenticated, we will use that same tunnel to authenticate for the intranet tunnel, the second tunnel right here, which is the way the user actually accesses resources in the local area network. So we literally are using one tunnel purely for authentication and authorization, and then the second tunnel is going to get used for access into the resources. Everybody follow so far? Not going too fast, too slow? Keep going. All right. So this happens automatically and actually without any user intervention. When the laptop is brought up, the infrastructure tunnel comes up. The user doesn't even have to log in, and the tunnel is already up. That's why when your security group comes to you and says, I need a way that I can be able to contact laptops that people call in and say are now lost and see if we can recover these assets. Believe me, it's a big thing for people. A lot of folks come in and say, I lost the laptop. They didn't lose it. They actually misplaced it in the trunk of their car. So if the machine is actually on in direct access land, it'll connect back to that server, and you'll be able to see that system. Now all you have to do is go war trolling. You know what you're looking for. You ride by their house, you go by the places they frequent, check them out in the parking lot. see if you can get your system to respond. I'm not saying that you should be going to their door or anything, but at the same time, you got to get your resource back. And you need to do what you can to try. Once he's up, when the user logs in, the currently logged on user's credentials are provided, again, down that infrastructure tunnel. And then, of course, authenticated, and he has access into the infrastructure. Go ahead. As long as it's connected, you can send communication to it via SCCM packages, case jobs, scripts. So you can send the ping of death to it if you'd like to. You can wipe it out. I'll talk more about some of the ways. It is not a built-in feature. It is the beyond just the vanilla deployments. It's certainly the thing, though, that I get, I would say in 6 of 10 engagements, customers want to know, how do I get these laptops back? How do you get this back? Well, okay, you got to have a package to kill the box if that's what you want to do, or you have to start pinging it, do the war troll, ride by their house, ride by their car in the parking lot, see if you can recover that machine. We're getting some pretty good responses, actually, by the way. Nobody's gotten sued yet, but they are getting some machines back. So that's been exciting. In and of itself. Being from Dell, everybody thinks you were a laptop guy, a server guy, that kind of thing. I know nothing really of their hardware line at this point. I used to be big on, I think it was 2650s back 10 years ago is what they sold, pizza boxes. Yeah. But nowadays I'm just like, I care about solutions that secure infrastructure. Whatever that is, go ahead and go get that back. Fellow down here? That's right. That would break that piece of the solution. Some of this you can't work around. If you deny null, I can't do anything for you in IP HTTPS. You would then have to fall back to leveraging Teredo or 6-4. Most of your clients, when they connect via, let's say, for example, a hotel room, which is dark hotel is a totally different topic. We can talk about that for several hours. I wouldn't recommend connecting in a hotel room, but when they connect there, they typically get that symmetric NAT, and that would be a Teredo connect for them coming back in. If not, and it's a public IPv4, then it's a 6-4. It's only when those fail, when the ports are closed for those protocols, and he cannot bring those tunnels up under Teredo and 6-4, he drops to IP HTTPS, or if you kill those in your configuration. I've had customers that say, I don't want to do Teredo, I don't want to do 6-4, and I say, well then you're going to always do IP HTTPS. And when your security group comes in and says, hey, we're going to do Poodle here, and we're going to cut null, you're not going to have a remote access connection. So you need to be cognizant of what you're doing. It's the slider, right? I want it to be highly secure, but I also have to leave some bandwidth in there for my user to be somewhat productive, right? So you have to look at that kind of thing. If it's IP HTTPS only, no encrypt under Poodle for a deny there, it won't happen. Anybody else? Questions? IP HTTPS, Internet Protocol, and then hypertext transfer. It's concatenation, yes. No, it's more of an indication. Back in the day, when I was here 5 years ago, we talked about the IAG, or Intelligent Application Gateway product, which later became UAG, Unified Access Gateway. And their big claim to fame was an Ssl Vpn. How many people remember Ssl VPNs? Right? They were the the next thing, right? And so instead of coming out and saying, this is an SSL VPN, they banned or branded that, right, as Internet Protocol, and then use the HTTP piece because they're leveraging 8443 communication to tunnel the IPsec traffic through. So it's an SSL VPN that is an IPsec connection, if you will. A little bit of a variant there. Does that answer your question? Or? Okay. So just nomenclature. Teredo, 6-4, IP HTTPS. Any others? Any other questions? All right, so challenges to direct access. You know, it sounds like, or at least I thought, right? I came out of Microsoft. I was a security guy. I was a subject matter expert for the Unified Access Gateway product. I flew all over the world. I had so many points the year that I left Microsoft. I was able to take my kids to Disney World, and we had an excursion and, you know, like free hotel rooms. It was like constant travel. It was great. It was the best problem to have, except for my wife hated my job. I liked my job. I had a great expense account. Unified Access Gateway was the place where direct access kicked off, right? They had DA on 2008 R2, but it was a single server solution. There was no enterprise in the world that would ever touch that because they knew that every one of those boxes go down eventually for maintenance, anomalies, patching, you name it. But UAG had the ability to tie multiple systems, up to 8 of them together, and expose direct access to the internet. And so that was the place where DA got kicked off. So I was like, hey, let's go jump on this direct access thing. This looks great. It has what in it? IPsec. Are you kidding me? Maybe we should go back to these SSL VPNs. These look pretty easy. So UAG was one of the challenges because all of the customers today that you're going to encounter, how many people do consulting as their primary line of work? Go out and talk with customers, hear their pain, the struggle points that they have. Then they ask you to like build a ship that will take them to Mars. They want to pay, I don't know, $5,000 for that over, what, 6 months or so? Sound about right? Everybody wants something for nothing. They remember UAG was free, and they could deploy direct access all day. But guess what? Microsoft came out about 2 years ago and said, we're not supporting TMG. We're not supporting UAG. Later, it took them about 8 more months to come around to that when they realized TMG was the bedrock firewall foundation that defended the UAG solution. It was like, whoops, we missed one. Hey, let's go kill that. So all of my customers are like, well, what about this UAG thing? We used to do that. I remember you used to talk about this all the time. You can't do that anymore. The other one is the security perception. Challenges to direct access are what fellows that are in your security group are going to bring up. They're not here to make your life hard. They're here to figure out what the risks are to the deployment for your particular enterprise. They will point at IKE exploits. They will talk to you about curb exploits. They will tell you they don't like things that sit on their edge and touch their LAN. How many people have heard that one before? I don't like things that sit on my edge and touch your LAN. Happens all the time. Rightfully so, right? So there's an issue of security because when we talked about UAG, it had a class 4 firewall in it, a stateful packet inspection firewall in TMG that we don't have when we deploy direct access in 2012 R2 today, which is the supported place where you can put out direct access. Access to domain controllers is our next situation that comes up. Tons of customers who have read-only domain controllers in their DMZ, who deploys read-only domain controllers, period. You should look into read-only domain controllers. They help me get a much better return for my projects because they lengthen my engagement with you. But they also make it easy to defend your Active Directory network where it's exposed to the edge. If you have a read-write domain controller in the edge and I can touch it, I can exploit it, and therefore I can make changes to your Active Directory, And that's when the trouble starts. So access to domain controllers is a challenge for direct access deployments in that we have to have a read-write domain controller. Up until October of last year, Microsoft's supportability standpoint for direct access didn't say anything about read-only domain controllers until I sent a fellow named Red Welburn to Richmond, Virginia. And I said, Red, this is going to be the easiest week you're going to have all year. Go up there. Here's the script. Here's how you deploy direct access. You know my phone number. Call me if something happens. 3 days into it, hey, Dan, yeah? What about these read-only domain controllers? Don't you have that script that we used to have in UAG? What are you talking about, Red? They have read-only domain controllers in the DMZ, Dan. Oh. And that's when it gets quiet. Let me figure this out and call you back. Hang on. Because in UAG, we used to have a really nice script that came up and said, copy the script, take it to your domain controller, and run that, and it will write all the group policies that your client and your server need so that you can run a read-only domain controller. And after hashing through for, I don't know, I think it probably took about a month with Microsoft, they finally updated the supportability doc and said, guess what? You can't use a read-only domain controller in a direct access deployment. So some of hardening direct access is actually being able to have a read-write access for your domain controller. You have to have some way to be able to get to that, and I'll talk to how you defend that. Believe me, we've been over and over with this thing, months, late nights. IPv6 inside. Everybody shakes their head. They're like, no way, he's not putting a read-write domain controller in my DMZ. It's not going to happen. It's not ever going to happen. IPv6 inside's the next one. So very simply, your network group is going to look at you and go, no hablas inglés. We don't know anything about IPv6. What do you want? I don't even think our network carries that. And so it becomes a big, big point of contention for them. Simply because the next piece, ISOTAP, is what you're going to use to manage out. When you have an inside connection from SCCM, for example, that has to emanate inside your network and go to your client, you have to do some type of IPv6 connectivity. And before October of last year, if you read those supportability guides for direct access under Windows 2012 R2, it didn't say anything about we don't support ISOTAP. Until I found it. And they said, oh, guess what? We don't support that. Yeah, but you didn't say you did. So don't do it. Just write it on the note now. Don't do ISOTAP. Why is that true? The reason it's true is because when you put direct access in, direct access servers become ISOTAP routers. And they in and of themselves want to have an ISOTAP prefix. And when the second direct access server comes up, what is it? What is it? It's a ISOTAP router. And now it has a different prefix because the prefix is built off the IPv4 address. So what ends up happening is clients that connect on one side don't know anything about the other side. So now we have problems with connectivity, we have problems with manage out, and we have very unhappy customers. So now you need to use native IPv6 internally, period. The last piece, buy-in. If you're a consultant and you go out and work with somebody in a company environment, the guy can tell you all day long. He'll stroke a check. He'll give you a fellow who will work with you. They'll make the decks ready. It'll all be great when you show up. Things are going to be awesome. And then either the accounting department gets wind of it, the security department gets wind of it, some other department decides that they don't like that solution because they were going with another solution. So the biggest thing in buy-in that I can tell you is make sure everybody says yes. Go to each person and make sure that they're willing to say, yeah, we'll support this going in. Because nothing brings a deployment to a screeching halt like a department that says, we won't let you put that in because the security perception, or it's not a class 4 firewall, or you can't have access to domain controllers, or we don't know anything about IPv6. Any questions? Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You know, I mean, if I could tell you one thing you can try to do today is very slowly over time make portions of your network IPv6 capable. Assess what you have. Determine what the actual impact is going to be and what the value is going to be, and begin investing in setting up your IPv6 because it's not going away. It's coming. It's scant dollars that you don't have in the budget probably for this year, but if you just put 40 hours into it in the next budget and maybe 80 beyond that to make sure that the interfaces are correctly addressed, you have connectivity from geographically disparate domain, data centers, those kinds of things, and truly put some thought into it, you will save yourself loads of time. This is the equivalent of back in the day, back when I had like all dark hair, and we went from having very small spaces in IPv4 land, and somebody said, oh, guess what? We have to like re-IP the network. And it sounded like a really cool thing, except for it meant that like every weekend for 6 weeks I get to be at work, right? And we would spend all weekend making changes to subnets, subnet masks, IP addresses, just make the change for IPv6. Does that help? Other questions? So that's one of the biggest benefits of direct access is there's truly no real client. You know, like with SonicWall is the stupid Dell product that they ask us to use. It has a client, and this is the dumbest thing in the world, right? Direct access has group policies that go in that configure it. They tell the actual client operating system, this is where you find your endpoints. This is where your NLA is. These are the methods that we're going to support. All of the things that the client needs to know come via group policy. So there's no client. That's correct. And hence all of the fun that comes along, right? In January, in like waist deep snow, I spent a whole week with a customer while we chased down the way that their group policy mangled, mashed, or otherwise destroyed my group policy deployment. And I had to figure out how do I get what my customer needs and what I need to happen all at the same time. So there's a little challenge in that regard as well. It's a wizard today. Back in the old days, there was a whole bunch of scripts and all the good fun stuff that we used to enjoy doing. It's a wizard, but don't let that fool you into thinking that I go in and go click, click, check, check, tap, click OK, and it's deployed, because it's not quite that simple. You will run into pieces. Put it in a lab. Give it a shot in there. If it works right for you there, try it in pre-production. All the stuff that we've been saying for 25 years, right? Did I just tell you how old I am? All right. So the part that we came to, or came for tonight, maybe you came for that. Did anybody really see the hardening part and go, ooh, I want to see that? Nobody? Okay. So my customer basically said, look, I don't trust direct access. In fact, I've had 4 customers now that have been ready to throw me out. I don't know how my sales guy was able to actually go in there and sell it, other than I was feeding him deck items under the table. Once I get there and start talking to them, they're like, hey, we're not doing that. Period. I say, well, wait a minute, hold on one second. We can do this, but we have to do things a little more differently. Like, do you use client drive encryption? Who here has encrypted hard drives, fully encrypted? Who has partitioned encrypted hard drives? Okay, those are great as long as you make sure that all of the data stays inside that partition, right? First time the document's outside that partition, guess what? It's not protected. Pin on boot. Who here uses pin on boot? Pin on boot is number one for pieces of your infrastructure that are in the field. If you want to be able to maintain control of the data on the system and the system itself, pin on boot is the only defense that you truly have. Because if they don't know the pin, they can't boot the system. And if you can't boot the system up, you're probably not going to stand a very good chance of being able to get to the information stored upon it. It sounds really simple, but it's the kind of thing that it's difficult to go to a manager, director, and VP and get them to approve funding for. But drive encryption is a very simple process. You don't have to do Microsoft drive encryption. Please don't confuse that. The fact that I'm an ex-Microsoft guy, I'm not telling you BitLocker is the way to go. But drive encryption for your remote systems, absolutely. Even if you don't put direct access out. As a security guy, I'm one of the founders for your ISC² chapter here in Charlotte. I would rather see you put money and time into defending the edge, and the edge is the tentacle that reaches out into the internet, the world. If they lose the laptop and somebody finds it, they don't know the PIN, they can't boot it up. They can't stick the little thumb drive in and try and crack their weak password that says Granny loves me. Right? Who scans for passwords? Who scans for passwords that are weak and short and all of the other fun things that we just cringe for? If you're not scanning passwords today, you're waiting to become tomorrow's headline. So one of the big features, beating that horse to death, one of the big features of direct access in 2012 is like, hey, it's really super simple and you can authenticate with Kerberos proxy, which is an awesome tool. It's a single sign-on tool. And what's wrong with single sign-on? I bet you know. I bet you know exactly what's wrong with single sign-on. Yes, you. You're in, you're in. I sign on here, I can sign on there. And I can sign on here, and here, and here, and I can get to everything. Single sign-on is awesome. Because when the vice president of finance says, I am sick of typing my password into this thing over and over and over again, what do you say? 3 letters. Single sign-on. SSO. That's going to solve your problem. But it also drops the defenses that were naturally set up to require your passwords to get into those systems to begin with. Curb proxy is the same thing for direct access. When your customer looks at you and says, I don't like that because I know Kerberos has had a recent hack. Who remembers what happened in December with Kerberos? The CAC table was fallible, wasn't it? It was a piece that even I was like, I never saw that coming. I never even thought about that. And when it happened, my customer was on it like, as they say, white on rice. On the phone. Hey, did you see this? No, I haven't had coffee yet. What's going on? Kerberos, it's fallible. I can't have that. Okay, we can work around that. There's actually a setting that forces that client to not use Kerberos within direct access. And so you avoid curb proxy. But guess what? Now I'm using certificate off. So now I'm issuing certificates, right? Auto enrollment in a Windows environment. Who's Unix guys? Unix guys? Who's the Unix guys here? Right? Auto enrollment is not a feature there, right? We have to work through other mechanisms to be able to fulfill that. But Windows has awesome auto enrollment capabilities for certificates. So we could go all day with those. That makes that easy. And it gets around curb proxy. It's a weaker piece of it. I'm not saying it's bad. If you're doing a 2-node setup and your risk profile, right? Who's done a risk assessment in the last 12 months? If you did not raise your hand, do a risk assessment. Make your life easy. Don't make it where I have to come to see you to help you fix this problem. If you did that risk assessment, you'll look at Kerberos and you'll say, that's a problem for me because I can't count that Microsoft plugged all the holes. So get off that, go to certificate off, which as long as you're going to manage your PKI environment and put strict ACLs against your PKI, make it so that that is actually well defended, you can issue certificates and do certificate authentication with no problem. 2 adapter design. In direct access, I can put it out there with a single adapter. Why would I even want to think about doing that, though? Right? Because now the traffic comes in on the same adapter, it goes up the stack, we do something up here with it, and then we send it back down the stack and back out on the same adapter. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? Anybody? It's what we used to call a bridge connection, right? It's the same adapter. 2 adapter design, very minimum, period. When I do the deployments and do the designs, I start off with, here's the outside and here's the inside. And then my customer goes, no. I want to put 1 adapter. And I'm like, then you're talking to the wrong guy. I should go get back in the plane because we can't put it out there that way. It's not defendable. I can't sleep at night with it that way. So we talked about having the read-write domain controllers and having them available to us. I led you on. No, I will not put them in the DMZ. And in order to accomplish access to a read-write domain controller, I end up breaking the quote-unquote supportability. I'll admit it freely here. I sinned against Microsoft. And putting a 3rd adapter in that machine so that I can reach over into another VLAN where I park a read-write domain controller for a time being. Because I don't have to have access to that read-write domain controller 24/7, 365, forever and ever, amen. I have to have that access while I configure the machine, write the group policy out, and bring up and shut down the actual interface, the GUI of direct access. After that, I can shut that off. I don't need that. And then my whole scenario is quote-unquote supportable, right? Except for we just don't ever tell them about that 3rd adapter when we call them up and go, hey, we got problems over here. And they say, what's on that direct access server? I got to see that. Well, I got an outside and I got an inside. What about this 3rd adapter? I don't know. It's disabled. That's exactly it. Server core. Back to strict ACLs. I'm sorry, I lost my place. So strict ACLs. How many of you let the word any enter into your config management for any access that you have from the internet to your DMZ and from your DMZ to your interior network? How many of you use the word any? Great. Don't ever do that. It's not a good thing. When we put this in, we made sure that only communications, and this is directly to having that, only communications from that direct access server to the read-write domain controller and back were capable, and only on the ports that we would leverage specifically for the group policy rights, the full 45s, 135s, 80, 443, right? So all of the fun ports that we would care about, and no more of the extra ports. Cut all that other stuff out. Yes, it's hard to support, which is exactly what I got told by customer number 3 in June of last year. It's tough to support server core. I'm like, so what? Just look it up. It's on TechNet. Type in direct access server commands. They'll all be in there, and you start learning the way we did back in the old days. One of my former colleagues is in attendance tonight, and Donna. She and I go back to NCR days, and we beat MP-RAS to death. And there were tons of commands. And you can have as much good time in Windows today doing server core. And it makes it that much easier because server core is going to bring down unused or unleveraged services that you're not running on Windows 2012 R2. So you won't have those exploits available to your attacker. Plus, your attacker actually has to know a little more about your operating system. They can't just get on there and go click, check, top, OK, and be in. AD site isolation, again, addressing the read-write domain controller. use AD site isolation, tie the Active Directory server along with your direct access server into the same Active Directory site. Therefore, you are binding so that he always authenticates there. If you do a NLTest /DC promo, not DC promo, NLTest space /dsgetdc : your domain name, it will return to you the site in which that particular operating system, whether that's a workstation, a server, or otherwise, is authenticating to. If you isolate Active Directory, you are containing them to utilize those pieces all day long. And when we go to server core, we can run another direct access command so that we can tell direct access, forget about that read-write domain controller I told you about. Go look at these read-only domain controllers that I have out here that I defend with. And so we change where we go and authenticate after we do the installation, and that's how we get away with that. It's a trick. I agree. I break the convention. But these are some pretty heady times. 2015, who would ever thought we would see, I don't know, the NSA spy on us? Did I say that? CryptoLocker, right? How many people have had fun with CryptoLocker? That's an enjoyable time, isn't it? I'll put both my hands up. If you don't have a backup, you're in bad shape. So AD site isolation goes with the next to last bullet, network isolation, to be able to provide enough defense, tying it to strict ACLs and using server core to be able to bring direct access into a place where it really limits where you can go once you get to direct access. Remember, the client comes down the pipe. He's not going anywhere but to that endpoint, the direct access server, and from there, services on direct access are going to permit him access over to, for example, file servers or otherwise. He's going to do that through DNS 6-4, a service on direct access, right? Or NAT 6-4 in the reverse so that we can figure out what client is connected. The other piece, in a pass the hash attack, we want to put SA accounts only for direct access server administration. Don't ever log in there with your regular account. Don't log in there with your administrator account. Log in there only with the SA account that you've set up for direct access. And that way we don't have that hash hanging around that we have to worry about later on. Who's had pass the hash experiences? We got to talk. If nothing, just to buy you a beer so that commiserate together. If you haven't had fun with pass the hash, see the man in blue? See me? Yeah, well, I mean, you can't tell them, right? Because you'd have to, like, break their leg, right? So pass the hash is not where you want to be. Pass the hash allows your attacker to take the hash value of your previous login and then use that against you. Even if you have two-factor, that's right. It is evil. And people have paid a couple of $3 million to have what are called gold card systems put in to beat pass the hash. Simply using a separate account, which you will then monitor. I'm not saying just put the account in. Use the account, monitor the account, and if something happens, shut that machine off today, right now. Do not go to lunch. But using that technique, you can then defend against pass the hash concerns. The last one, anti-executable packages. Who runs an anti-executable on a server? Anybody? I used to not to. Until they started going, but what about third-party things like JS scripts and VBS? And I was like, stop, you're overwhelming me. What do you want me to do with this? And the one thing I got out of my guy at Microsoft was, hey, we have this great product. You could run this, and it's called App Locker. And I'm like, App Locker? Oh, yeah, I probably passed over this because this looks horrible. It's fine. It's free. Okay? So with anything that's free, right, what happens? If it's free, you're the product, aren't you? Right? So when you install it, It goes out there and goes, I don't know anything about your installation. You need to tell me everything, right? So there's a ton of man hours that go into setting app locker up. I'm not saying don't use it. Microsoft makes it available for free for you. But if you put it in, know that you're going to put 10 hours, man hours, into configuring that and making it viable. A product that I will say is far easier to deploy is Pharonics. Pharonics, F-A-R-O-N-I-C-S, Pharonics anti-executable package is superior. You install it, and when it installs, what does it do? It goes out and it says, let me catalog your system. What are your running services? What are your running executables? What are the, you can take a signature-based approach and say, oh, okay, every time I run a update on Tuesday night from Microsoft, right, what's going to happen? It's going to fail. But you can take the signature that's applied to, for example, Explorer.exe, and then stick that in there, and then when Tuesday night comes, it goes, hey, look, the SIG's the same. We can run that. And so update will run successfully. So anti-executable packages, highly recommended, because when your hacker comes to your door, he wants to be able to run his payload, right? And his payload is going to be some other executable other than the ones that are natively run on that system, right? So if you don't run an anti-executable package, you have a forward-facing machine, I would highly recommend you look into some anti-executable package. I am not endorsing Microsoft versus Pharonics. I just happen to like the Pharonics approach. The cost was $69 a unit. When you deploy a globally deployed direct access solution with multiple servers and multiple locations, 4.6 is still 24. So that's pretty cheap considering I run it, it configs, builds a catalog, and then says, thanks. What do you want me to do when this happens? Do you want me to be silent? Sure, that's what I want. I don't want you to tell the hacker that you just shut down their executable. Just sit there. Just do it. Have it over with. Allow a WMI login or feed back into event logging so that you know what's going on. Absolutely. Pharonics had a good package. So in this case, I love Microsoft. I truly do. They were a wonderful employer. But Pharonics got them beat on any executable packages. So those are really the pieces on hardening that you can take. And again, these come from real-world deployments. Headaches, long nights, long flights. Any questions? Go ahead. I get it. I would say this. Don't put anything on the internet that you don't want your grandmother to find out. And the same thing goes for hackers. Don't put anything on the internet that you don't want a hacker to find out. I don't know that they're listening to, for example, your phone conversation, which would let your fax machine out, right? The fax machine you were talking about, right? You know, if the hacker is not directly connected to a switch at the telephone company, paying attention to that, I don't know if they're going to catch that or not. Where passwords are concerned, I'm very strong about don't write it down. You know, I got guys on my team last year. I had a fellow who took a certificate with a private key from the customer, which the customer was a bonehead to start with. I'm sorry, I love the guy. He was a wonderful man. But he gave my guy a private key certificate and the password that went with it. What did he do? He write in the email, here's the password. So as far as sending passwords, no. Self-provisioning, right? Self-provisioning for your new user, right? They log into a portal. Maybe that's a good way that you can try that with direct access, right? You could at least have an interactive conversation with them that is covered by IPsec, which is essentially probably the best VPN technology we could provide you today. There's something more coming, but it's not ready at this point. But you have to have a way to be able to provision the user. I agree, but that's a way to do it. You haven't asked a question all night. Go ahead. Yeah, and they write them down. Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, this is not direct access, right? We're just talking about passwords. I recommend you change your passwords almost as frequently as you change your underwear, at least every 90 days, if not more frequently than that, which is a big pill, right? Because you want some password that is quote-unquote complex. It is at least 8 characters long, which I don't consider to be truly complex. It has an upper and lowercase character, alphanumeric, has a number in it, and it has a meta character. Who knows what a meta character is? Know what a meta character is? That's right. It's that row of symbols that are right above the numbers. You can pick those out with almost guaranteed success. Depends on what system you're at. But if you have that combination in there at a minimum of 8 characters, you have a fairly complex password. If you're changing it every 90 days, you have a pretty good chance that you're making the frequency revolve, if you will. Talk about board defense, right? You know, how you change the frequency frequently. Keep changing the password. If they have to write it down, I would say you need to go back to them and talk about training. Writing the password down is a way that it can get out. It's not a sin to have a user that calls the help desk and says, I forgot what my 12-character password is. I would rather reset it for you and you get a passphrase, right? We all do this, right? This is not new for us. Passphrases. You make up some string that has some meaning to you. You chunk it up and hash it, right? Maybe you do so much as to take the semi-prime numbers and make your own hash and build those against some of those AC2 values. I don't know. The point is make a password that has some value to them and then let them use that. If they write it down, it's as weak as water. Because when you have a static password, you have a password that is discoverable. And you will be the last person to know that the hacker figured out what that password was. That's another piece too. I mean, you know, security in and of itself, right, is a multi-layered approach. You can't have just strong passwords. You can't have passwords that change. You have to have detection and correction, right, to go along with those pieces. It's not weeks. It's not. It used to be 72 hours on a graphics processing unit was what, about 18 years ago? No time. Yeah. Yep. You'll probably, being a security guy, you'll probably say, yep. Really? Let's hear it. True. Right? true. Right. Yeah, but a good point. I mean, so some of that is like, what's your risk profile, right? And if you didn't do the risk assessment, you don't know what your risk profile is. So you don't know whether you're willing to put up with a non-changing password, one that changes every 45 days, every 90 days, every 180 days. You know, it's one of those choices you have to make, but you have to do it based on information. You can't guess it. You have to do a risk assessment and decide what is the posture of the organization, what will they put up with. That's absolutely true. Yeah. Don't do this. Don't do the South Carolina Department of Revenue and use the same local network or local admin password on every machine. Don't make it easy, right? Make it at least different. Somebody raise your hand. Was it you again? So, yeah, I mean, you know, when you do forensics analysis on a machine, right, you're not only taking the actual file system, but you'd like to take the in-memory snapshot. Then you need to look into things like LSASS and the process that's used there for the local security authority. You begin looking at what is in view for me, right? And that means I'm going to run a debugger. I'm going to go dig down into the way the structures of the operating system were at the time I took that snapshot, right? That hashed value there is relatively easy to crack. In fact, moments, you know. Yeah. Yeah. You're replaying it, right? You can do a replay there. Yeah. That's about 48 pages, so, you know, a short plane flight, 48-page read, it's worth your time. Anybody else? I think I'm out of time. Anybody else? No? We'll talk after. How about that? What? This guy? Go ahead. So a couple of pieces to help you kind of clear the decks. I don't have to have a browser. I don't care. You could have Chrome, you could have Firefox, what they used to call Internet Explorer, whatever, right? You know, you could put any browser on there because it doesn't have anything to do with direct access and tunnel establishment. The IP that your client has, he's been assigned by his ISP, okay? So it's in the coffee shop, right? So whatever that wireless router, probably one of those old Linksys WRT 54Gs, right? Something really very secure. He gives him a, you know, private IP, IPv4 192.168, right? He's going to attempt to try and use Teredo. So that's the connectivity method he'll try based on that IPv4. But it comes, that IP assignment comes from the actual WAP or hardwire, that kind of thing. Right. Your IPv6 address that you get actually is determined by the direct access server, and it gets handed to you in neighbor discovery, okay? Under my IPv4, right? So I encapsulate that IPv6 communication in an IPv4 IPsec tunnel. So I use my known client IPv4 address that was given to me by my ISP, and then I use my IPv6 address that's on my IP HTTPS pseudo adapter, right? And form that communication. The reason you end up going over IPv6 is because the client has an IPv4 address assigned to its adapter. If it were to get assigned an IPv6 address, guess what direct access would do? Nothing. We would send the IPv6 communication across the internet because we would know that we could reach out and get to the direct access server. Right? So that happens. That's a very good point. That's one of those places, right? Customer says, hey, I went to Canada and I had this Verizon wireless hotspot thing and I fired my laptop up and it didn't work. And I was like, what IP did you get? I don't know, but it was like this big chunky number. It had letters in it. And I'm like, you got an IPv6 address. I'm not even going to bother to bring a tunnel up to send traffic because I know I can reach from there to the direct access server over IPv6. That's right. You got a long while. Based on the adoption rates I've seen, exactly. I fully expect that I can retire before it will really roll out. I mean, maybe my refrigerator will do it, but you know, I mean, at this age, I think I got plenty of time. Go ahead. So IPv6, I think, is, all right, a lot of people already own an IPv4 block, right? They have no reason to move off that other than they're exhausting their IPv4. NAT provided them a way to be able to take a single public IPv4 and make multiple private IPv4s available. That works. I mean, it's scalable. It's been there forever. I don't think we're going to run out of that until we start having air conditioners, you know, laundry mats, refrigerators, weed whackers that are on the internet. You know, and when we do that, right, you know, they say that one of the things, right, when IPv6 came out 10 years ago, they said that we would have enough address spaces in there that we could assign a number to every blade of grass, every person, everything, and some colors, and still not run out because it's that big. So I don't think we'll be there. I honestly think we have quite some time. It's good to know at this point. I think you're going to see more of it. I think you'll see it in applications like the Internet of Things, you know, chillers and the things that people try to stick on the internet. And as a security guy, right, you're probably like, please, could you, you know? But, you know, the point is, you know, you've got a lot, but it's coming. Probably in your career lifetime. Probably not in mine. That's all really I have. I think. Awesome. Thank you, buddy. Good to see you again.
You always do a good job.
You try.